But until you actually get to master rank, you need to master some Pokemon. So with that, you really need to start picking Pokemon that you haven't played before, and not necessarily Pokemon that are against your playstyle. If you want to be an attacker, that's great, but I would still suggest that you need to start finding other picks than just your favorite Pokemon. If you love Cramorant, man, power to you, but I wouldn't say you pick Cramorant over, say, a Mew or Mewtwo Y. These are just the better Pokemon. In the same instance, if you have more Pokemon, you would be able to pick more be able to pick more Pokemon that you actually would find more useful. You'd start finding more favorites, but you could find favorites that are more in the meta. But you definitely shouldn't just be playing Greninja just because you really want to play Greninja. You need to find that Pokemon that you can play, that you enjoy playing, but is also really good in the meta build of things, that works well with other teams. You really just need to think more deeply into what you actually want to be playing, instead of just playing your main character 24/7. Now, tip 2 is pretty much along the same line of that, but it's you need more Pokemon. You can't just have 5 attackers and an all-rounder and defender. You need to spread out a bit further. You need at least, in my opinion, 2 of each type, and 2 of each type that you actually like, enjoy and are good at and get practice in. So a Blastoise is a good place to start because he's really good. Lapras, Goodra, Umbreon, they're really, really high skill Pokemon that aren't too hard to get a hang of, but once you get a hang of them in the right play style, man, they really crush it. The other point to this is that if your team, for what awful unfortunate reason, just decides we're gonna run 3 attackers, you're not left there in the wind with no option other than pick an all-rounder or an attacker yourself. You could pick a support, you go Slowbro, Blastoise, you could go Defender, you get what I'm saying. Yeah, you could go Hooper, you could go Eldegoss as well in the support role, now that I mention that. But you don't necessarily just want to be an attacker player, because you're most likely going to run into matches where other people do not care if you want to play attack or you want to play central attack or you want to play speedster, defender, whatever. I mean, I've had matches where we've had 3 supports, where we've had 4 all-rounders, 5 attackers. It's just one of those matches where it's forsaken, man. It's gone before it starts, and unfortunately, if you had more Pokemon, those kind of matches won't work. Especially if you had more Pokemon that you practiced, liked, and actually learned the mechanics of. Then you could see, okay, well, we need a defender. We don't have a defender. Or we need a supporter. We don't have one. And you could pick up that slack where the team is actually dropping. You would have advantages against teams where you see 4 attackers and you're a Leafeon. I mean, that's just, it's not even a match for you then. It's just free, it's free time. You just get to go in and get some kills if you're smart about it. And that's the beauty about having a bunch of Pokemon that you know, that you like, and not just having a handful of your favorite picks. Now, on to tip 3. And I've noticed this way too many times. You need to find some XP. I see a lot of matches where my teams lose purely because our tier 1, if not one of them, both of them, go down, and instead of actually just going to farm these Odenos or the Indeedee that spawn when we actually, lose a tier 1 goal, they just keep fighting. They just keep going back into the fight. They see that the enemy is pushing still on the goal pad. Instead of just backing up, farming, realizing that we've just given them a bunch of XP, most likely 9 out of 10 times it's mid-game, they just got unite moves off of us, and you don't really want to push that fight. It really depends on the situation, but almost always you should farm first and then re-engage once the whole team is up and gotten some levels behind their back. You shouldn't keep pushing a losing match, because it's not going to get any easier. By the second time you go down to them, they've already got a whole level on you now. It's just one of those. You need to find XP while you can, and I have a good video where I talk about how to win on a losing match, and it talks more in depth about your camp times, but that is something that you need to know. You need to know when do the Altera and the Swablu spawn? When does the Reggie spawn? After they get KO'd, how long does it take before they come back? How long does the normal farm spawn take till they come back? When do they spawn? And you'll start seeing these patterns that you need to start following, and that will actually allow you to start coming back. And the ironic thing is, the same thing works that if you are actually pushing a match, you really want to go for this comeback XP that gets spawned when the tier 1 goal goes down. You really need that comeback XP. One, if you're a losing team, you need it to keep, in the game. If you're a winning team, you do it to completely take your opponent's chance to come back out the game, because now you're starting to snowball. They don't have any place to pick up XP. They don't have a fighting chance anymore. You're 3-4 levels above them. It's 3 minutes in, and what can they do about it? But when you actually give them the XP, as you can see on screen even right now, we came back with a 1 level difference being lower than them. Now we're a level equal to them, and I just took out the Dragapult. Now I'm a level above. Now we have the lead because of that comeback XP. And we all came together as a team to fight. It's a big thing. And next thing we're going to talk about is how to do good math. So yeah, we just saw Slowbro scored a 40, but I had 50. So that's not really a big difference, but that 10 points really could have changed the match for us at the end if it's a close match. Sometimes I see it in games where the same mistake gets made, in the goal only needs 10 or 5 points to get broken, and someone has a 40 and someone with a 20 will go score instead, or a exact 15 on the spot will go score, instead of allowing the bigger number to overcap and break the goal. And those little bits of that 30s and 40s and 50s, the higher rank you go, it's not a whitewash of a kind of match where the losing team gets 300 points and the winning team gets something like 900 points. It's most of the time a very, very close match where 50 points really will make or break the match if they're playing properly. I mean, here we can see that if they had to get Rayquaza, we had only broken a tier 2 on theirs. They would have easily then came back on us, and vice versa. If we didn't stop them from getting Rayquaza, but we went to go score and they went to go score, we'd still be safe as long as we made sure they didn't get Ray. It's an interesting dynamic, but you really need to know how to use good math. Rather let the teammate with the most score than you getting a 5 in when he could have gotten a 40, and now you just gave back all that XP to the enemy team with a comeback XP, and you only scored 5. Your teammate now has to go fight all of them, and they're going to get buffed up just to score that 50. So it's a waste. Let them get that. Let them get that XP. Let them break the goal. You can save up and get a bigger goal in. Now on that, tip number 5. You need to show up to your teammates and help them. You really need to do this. Whenever there's an objective, it is so important to know when the Reggies come up for the same reason, when the Altera comes up. Because as a central, as a laner, you need to know when the big fights are starting, when to actually expect a gank coming your way, and when to go as a whole team towards one objective depending on your situation. You need to show up there. If one of you is missing and their whole team is there, then that's 4 people down and they're going to come to you next. And they're just going to hit you at a speed. There's 2 of you missing. Unfortunately, even if you help later, your team's not going to be on deficit of an offset on the KO times. So 2 of you are going to rock up, but only one of them is coming back from base. By the time you 3 die to their 5, the other 2 will be walking back in, and it'll just be a loop of you outnumbered constantly. So you really need to know when to show up, and majority of the time is if there's a big objective going down and you see that for whatever reason you disagree with which objective your team is going. They want Regieleki and you decide, Registeel is more important. But is there 3 people in their lane and only 1 in yours, maybe 4 people in their lane, 1 in yours, then you need to go and help the team, irrespective if you are right. And I would agree with that. The Registeel is more important than the Regieleki, but you need to go help your team. It's rather that you win the lesser buff as a whole team and then steam down on them than to lose the buff when you're not there. And ironically, the reverse is so true, is that if you're there as a whole team and they're separated, then you're going to take that buff immediately and you can go clean up the other lane. I mean, it's majority teamwork. It's why it's called Pokemon Unite. We need to unite and do things together. Now, on that, we're going to hit tip number 6. It's a bit of a fighting strategy tip, and it's called cooldown and run away. So, if you start spamming cooldowns and you're not sure if you can just win the fight, you need to do what I did right there. You spam your cooldown and you back out. You put your moves on cooldown, essentially. You're going to use your moves and you're going to back out. Then when your moves are up again, you can start searching around for attack again. But when you do not have the ability to use any of your moves, you do not want to be in that fight, because the enemy team technically would out damage you and you would kind of be left. I mean, here's some weird lag. Man, that's just awful. And you'd be left there like a duck in water, nothing to do, and they could just spam all theirs down on you and you'd be stuck there. As you'll see here, I use my moves and then I back out. I don't try to stay in for the fight, and unfortunately I do die, but the idea is that you just want to use your moves and get out. And this is especially important for things like speedsters. Dodrio is the most important one to remember this for, because you just want to come in, poke the enemy, back out. Then when the enemy team starts fighting your team again, you want to come in, poke them, back out. If you have the ability to get a kill, you get that kill. But you really, you want to use your moves in and out until they're low enough to actually just take that quick fight. But you don't actually want to drag out fights. If you drag out fights, you're leaving problems. You leave the ability for a jungle gank. It's not something that you actually want. You want a small poke, and then when you know that you have the advantage on this, we have a 3v2, we can try and push it, but I'm here starting to lose mine, so I want to start backing out. Scissor's pushing, I think I can help him. I'm gonna die here anyways. No, it wasn't worth it. Scissor gets the kill, but he is about to go down to that Dodrio. And there you can see it on Dodrio as well. He's playing miraculously. He used, even though he knew Scissor was low, he used his moves on Scissor, he backed out, his teammate came in, and he came in to finish off Scissor. There. Man, it is such a good tactic. It just needs to be known, and you need to practice it. Myself, I'm not that great at it yet. I get a bit overconfident once I've started an attack, but it becomes a habit almost to attack, and then fall back as you can, and then come back within range when your abilities are ready. On more basic attack Pokemon like Mewtwo Y, I don't think it's so necessary, because you really want to spam that button and just, do as much auto attacks as you can. But on more Pokemon that are heavy, like a Mamoswine, on their moves doing majority of the damage or helping them engage, you really want to use your cooldowns, attack once or twice, and then get out of there. And now on to tip number 7, when to actually rotate. So this comes in again with getting XP in knowing when actually to leave your lane and go to an objective. As a jungler, it's a bit different, but we'll talk firstly as a laner. So as a lane, when you rotate, you essentially only really want to go to objective or go to any kind of big fight. If you see there's 4 people in bot lane and only 1 person in your lane, one of you, I wouldn't always say both, because you would leave your lane open and that person could just the enemy Pokemon could just sit there in lane and essentially dominate and get all the free XP. But one of you should at least go down and help with the jungler. So then you would be on the offset and helping push, and hopefully you were winning lane, and it would allow your teammate that you left behind to push. So it's a bit of a 50-50. Do you want to send the more attacker type Pokemon from your lane down to go help, or top to go help, or do you want to send the defender supporter to go help? And it's a hard call to make, but majority of the time you want to have this peel-off effect. And if it's more late game, you really should be seeing this peel-off effect as the whole team should be surrounding for objectives, trying to help each other farm. And you could go so deep into knowing when to rotate, because it goes so much into farming and so much into understanding when spawn comes and comeback mechanics, and when fights are necessary and when fights aren't necessary, and honestly, what objectives you need, what objectives you are okay with leaving. If it's okay for them to take the Regieleki and push it into your tier 1, breaking it, because it would mean that you're all ready for the Rayquaza fight. We could go really deep into this, but majority of the time you just want to know that at 850 you need to rotate as a laner to your center of lane to go get the Alteras and the Swablu. Around 7 minutes, not around 7 minutes, at 7 minutes, you want to go to either top or bottom, depending on what your team thinks that they actually need, and go for that buff. And you need to know then that every 3 minutes after that buff has been KO'd, whether it's the Regieleki, a Regirock, a Registeel, Regice, you need to know that 3 minutes afterwards that you have KO'd them, they are coming back. These timers are necessary. Sometimes you also need to know that when Rayquaza is coming within the next 30 seconds, your team should not bum rush the Registeel and start a fight there, because if you lose, it will be awful and it wouldn't be worth anything. It would mean that your team might rock up late to the Rayquaza fight, which is bad because that means you do not have the positioning. Then they've completely covered it, allowing themselves to defend while their best ADC carry is essentially just taking down Rayquaza and they're keeping you off of it. It's so in depth about when to rotate, but it's only so much that I can actually mention without doing a whole video on its own. Ironically, tip number 8, how to jungle. It also deserves a whole video on its own on how to jungle, but essentially just like the last tip, you need to learn your spawn camps and their timers. You need to know when your buffs come up. Your buffs appear at 9:40 and they appear every 60 seconds after they've been KO'd. So every minute after you've KO'd one of the buffs, they will return. How you actually handle going about hunting your buffs, it differs from person to person, but majority of the time I would say you do the buffs first and then the ball toy if there isn't a fight or a gank necessary. But it's one of those, you really need to know which lane to help as well, and my idea is that you always go help bottom lane, because you kind of want that advantage when the Registeel, Regirock, Regice, whatever comes up. You really want that buff, especially if you're winning or losing. But a lot of people will say go help the lane that's already winning. I don't disagree with that, but preferably it would be the bottom lane that's winning. And tip number 9, it's the big number 9, it's how to Rayquaza. For Rayquaza, a big thing you need to first understand is, do you actually need it? If you don't need Ray, you should just defend Ray. Especially if your whole team is there and they're missing a teammate. You need to just defend Ray. Like right there, early in this match, you could see that we really needed Ray because it was an uncertain thing. They've scored in both of our goals and we had barely scored in their top tier 2. We had an uncertainty. So the do we need Ray essentially goes into 2 parts. If you don't need Ray, then you should defend it from the enemy until you've KO'd at least 2 of them, or 3 of them preferably, and then you should rip Ray to stop them from getting it. But if the answer is yes, maybe, or if you're unsure, you definitely actually need Ray. Then you need to fight them off of Ray and secure it as quickly as possible instead of just defending. If they are not there, then you need to start ripping, because the sooner you get that Ray, the quicker that you are actually able to score. Even if they may be backcapping, you're never certain of what their team could be doing. You always need to know that these aren't championship teams, these are solo queue teams. They're thrown together, these are people without communication. You need to rip that Ray quickly, because if you decide to defend it for 60 seconds and they were farming or trying to backcap, that was the opportunity for you to rip Ray and absolutely dominate the last few minutes of the game, if not the last minute of the game. But you didn't want to. So it all boils down to, if you need Ray, take Ray immediately if it's offered to you. If you don't need Ray, wait until the enemy team is at least 2 people down and then rip Ray. But you always ironically need Ray. And I guess this goes to tip number 10. You should never surrender. Never ever surrender. If you surrender, it doesn't matter if your team was throwing, if there's only one useful Pokemon that's currently not underfed, if there's only 3 of you that are level 12, I mean, if none of you are actually able to play at the moment because you all just counted, you should not surrender. Purely because of tip number 9. Ray changes the game. If you need Ray, you take Ray. If you don't need Ray, you defend it. Because if you don't defend it and they needed Ray, they turn the game on you. The whole 8 minutes before Ray technically does not matter, because Rayquaza will decide the match immediately. You really have to be losing in an absolute pigsty of a downhill mud battle to have stolen Ray from the enemy team and still have lost. And it's happened to me, but we definitely were going to lose if we didn't take Ray. Well, anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you check out this next video where I actually talked about how to win a losing match. I touched on a few things in here, but I went much more in depth in there. And enjoy. Thanks again. Bye.